Welcome to another episode of the BioHub. I'm really excited about our guest today. From a professorship in his native Netherlands to the SVP Chief Immunology Officer and Global Development Leader at JSK, and from leading small biotechs such as Tempero and Kintai to entering the venture world as a flagship partner. Now he is the CEO and President of Candel Therapeutics, a promising clinical immunotherapy company in the fight against cancer. Here we are with Dr. Paul Peter Tak. Welcome, Paul Peter. How are you?
Thank you very much. It's great being here. Thank you for inviting me.
No, honestly, it's a pleasure. It really is. Really is. Let's just jump straight in. So, let's just start on your journey. Can you discuss a particularly memorable or rewarding project that you've been involved in during your career and the impact it had on you personally and professionally?
Yeah, there are many, so I need to think now which one to choose. I've had a long career in academia, then big pharma, then in biotech, and there's always great new experiences that you need to learn from and that you can learn from. Then maybe I should start with the first one. I was still a PhD student. I was at the Leiden University Medical Center in the Netherlands. I was a physician trained as an internist. And I did many of the experimental medicine clinical trials in rheumatology at the time with new antibodies. This was a whole new era in rheumatology, 1996, 7, right? And we tested many antibodies that all failed, but we deeply understood why. So these were very well conducted trials. But I remember key experts at the time telling me, Paul Peter, an antibody therapy will never work for diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, inflammatory bowel diseases, etc. And then we tested for the first time in the world, in a collaboration with the Kennedy Institute in England, a molecule that we knew at the time as CA2, which later became known as infliximab or Remicade. That changed the whole field because that was the start of the field of TNF inhibitors, anti-TNF antibodies, that really transformed the life of many patients with rheumatoid arthritis, that would stop progressive joint destruction and therefore prevent disability. So I've seen a true paradigm shift in my life. And this is probably important because this reflects the history of medicine. It always goes like that. People don't believe in a new modality, in a new approach. Everything fails until something works. And the same has been true for cell and gene therapy, for immune checkpoint inhibitors, for CAR T cells. And actually, we are now at the cusp of showing, I think, transformation of patients' lives with solid tumors in the field of viral immunotherapies or multimodal immunotherapies. And that's exactly what we are working on at Candel Therapeutics.
Nice. That's really cool. And I think that's right, actually. And I think you're probably seeing that a lot modern day with VCs as well, with new ideas not necessarily being heavily invested in. One of our other guests actually said something where VCs don't invest in the first trip to the moon, visionaries do. And I think that's a great example of it.
It is true. There are, of course, visionary investors as well, but also many people are part of a kind of echo chamber and their risk appetite may be relatively low. They want to look for the next new big thing and they say, well, these modalities have been around for several years and they can lay out all the failures, as I could lay out all the failures in the late 90s in rheumatology. And then everything changed and nobody would ask the question, do you believe in antibodies? And the question would be, what kind of antibody? Against which molecule? For which indication? What is your development plan? What's your vision for the medicine? What's the power of the study? It's the same with the viral immunotherapies. We've even broadened this concept and we speak now about multimodal immunotherapies, where we can really change the tumor microenvironment, where we can basically achieve in situ vaccination against the patient's own tumor at the injected site, but also against uninjected distant metastases. And then we also see now examples of true oncolytic viruses that are also successful. So we are now at a tipping point in this field, I think. And I was really pleased to hear from Carl June, who's one of the leaders in the field of immuno-oncology in academia, the father of the CAR T cells, when he got the question last year, at SITC in San Diego, big immunotherapy meeting, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
He was there on stage. Somebody asked him, how do you see the future of immuno-oncology? And the first thing he mentioned said, well, we will see more and more combinations of therapies to induce remission, to cure patients. And the first combination that he mentioned was actually the combination of CAR T cells and viral immunotherapies. And that's what we are working on. And actually, we have a collaboration with him, which is also validating, I think, from for our company, Candel, from a scientific perspective.
No, that's so true. That's so true. I mean, I work with a few. I've never had the pleasure of meeting Carl June, but I work with a few companies who have him on the scientific advisory board. And when I'm working a role, it just validates it, doesn't it? Especially for a guy like me, the science doesn't come naturally. Yeah. Could you share the origin story behind Candel's discovery platform and what inspired its development and how it has evolved to contribute to the company's success so far?
Yeah, so I joined this company in September 2020. So I've been leading Candel for a little bit more than 3 years now, and it has become a whole new company. We call it Candel 2.0, basically. And at this moment, this is a period where we have so much data and so much inflection points coming up this year, 2024. But we have basically 3 platforms. The first is a clinical platform, that's CAN-2409. That's actually a virus that we use for in situ vaccination. We expect top-line overall survival data. So we're in patients based on the phase 2A clinical trial in therapy-resistant non-small cell lung cancer. And we've shown in the past that we are able to stop tumors from growing in patients who have failed everything, including chemotherapy and immune checkpoint inhibitors. So that's not a placebo effect, right, in these patients. That's real. So now the question is, we have shown that we can change the biology of the tumor. Does that lead to patients living longer with a good quality of life? We will be able to answer that question next quarter, in the second quarter of this year. Same is true for borderline resectable pancreatic cancer, area of huge unmet need, where we have presented initial data at SITC. We just got fast track designation from the FDA. Actually, for the first time, people started to pay attention. There was a big increase in the share price, big volumes, still too low, we believe, based on the value that we created. But we see now that people are starting to pay attention. And then we'll have to read out of 2 phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials in early localized non-metastatic prostate cancer. Also this year, in Q4, we have a fully enrolled phase 3 trial, 711 evaluable patients. So this could be a registrational trial. So that's the first platform. The second is what we call CAN-3110. That's a true oncolytic virus, an HSV, herpes simplex virus, that replicates specifically in the tumor while sparing the healthy tissue. We are testing it in, again, completely therapy-resistant disease, recurrent glioblastoma, brain cancer. These patients have a poor prognosis, but this specific population has already failed neurosurgical resection, surgery, and chemotherapy, and radiotherapy. So they run out of options. And we've just presented data based on the first 41 patients. So this is not a small trial anymore in Nature. Yeah. So again, great validation, I think, of the quality of the science and the promise of the medicine. We've now another 9 patients, basically completely confirming what we've presented before. And that was all after a single injection, very encouraging survival data. But now we've started to ask the question, what happens if you give multiple injections? Could it be even better? That work has started, is now completely funded by a very big grant from the Breakthrough Cancer Foundation. It also supports and validates our science. But I call this a platform because the activity of this virus is driven by a molecule called nestin. And we found nestin is also overexpressed in other cancers outside the brain. So think of triple negative breast cancer, sarcoma, etc. So you can imagine that if it's safe and well tolerated, and doable to inject this into the brain of a patient, then probably it's going to be relatively straightforward to inject it, for example, into a lump in a breast, right? So we could expand into other indications at the right time if we have secured the resources. And then we can, again, build a pipeline in a product. In other words, I see this as a platform. And then the platform that we created recently is a true discovery platform built from scratch. It's called Enlighten. It refers to the name of the company, Candel. It's about light. We light up the tumors, we inflame the tumors, we activate the immune system. And this is based on the following pillars. The first is we start with human biology for drug discovery. Based on my extensive experience at GSK, where I was global head of development, we've given a lot of thought about probability of success of a molecule during different stages of drug discovery and development. And what we and others found that is, if you focus as a starting point on human biology, you have a much higher chance that you will have a medicine that will change the life of patients at the other end of the process. So that's a starting point. So think of deep immunophenotyping of human tumors. So that's the first pillar. The second is we get an awful lot of data and we analyze that in a systematic way using artificial intelligence approaches, AI. That leads to systematic decisions about which genes do we want to deliver to the tumor microenvironment to solve a specific problem in oncology, like how do you get CAR T cells into a pancreatic solid tumor? That's exactly where we have the collaboration with UPenn. But just one example. And then let's say we can deliver 5 transgenes to the tumor microenvironment. And as a vector, that's the third pillar, we use HSV, herpes simplex virus, because of its large DNA capacity. We have all the IP and all the know-how and technology to play with all the aspects of HSV to optimize it to address a specific problem. So that's the third pillar. So that's together the Enlightened Discovery Platform. We're very excited. We just presented the data at SITC. Was a lot of interest. And we just submitted an abstract based on another molecule that came out of this platform, which will be presented at another scientific meeting this year.
Nice. That's so exciting, honestly.
There's a lot of excitement in the company at this time.
Yeah. What a year. I mean, that goes on nicely. So how does that compare to other companies, and what distinctive qualities, do you guys have that are shaping the future of biotech? I know you touched on it a little bit, but maybe more specifically.
There are other companies that develop viral immunotherapies. And as I said, this is now a new paradigm. And I think we are at or beyond the tipping point, showing that this modality can change the life of patients. And so other companies that work in this field are, for example, CG Oncology. They actually did an IPO today, first IPO of the year. They develop an adenoviral gene construct for bladder cancer. They're in phase 3, and the data look very encouraging. And the IPO looks extremely successful. So I think this is other validation. I don't see them as competitors at all. I think we ride the same tide. It would be as saying, well, I'm focused on an antibody, and another company also has an antibody. It's not necessarily.
Do you speak with them or not? Their CEO is Arthur Kawan, isn't it? So do you speak to him or not?
I met him, and it was a great conversation. So that was great. Other company that's active in the field of viral immunotherapies, but with a different virus again, with a different indication, is Replimune. I think they've shown encouraging data. So we see these companies as colleagues that also help to change the paradigm and to improve the life of patients potentially. That's the goal. But so where do we see the differentiation of our programs? We are the only company that I'm aware of that's in phase 3 in early localized non-metastatic prostate cancer, area of huge unmet need. There's basically no competition. And we did very extensive commercial analysis in the US, in the EU, including market access, payer research, all of that. So this is a multi-billion, at least, opportunity, which could have a huge impact on patients' lives. With a simple procedure, a simple therapy that's well tolerated by patients. You only need to inject them twice or 3 times in a patient's life. Because again, you vaccinate against the patient's own tumor, and the ultimate biological medicine are actually the CD8 positive cytotoxic tumor infiltrating lymphocytes that we educate in vivo in the patient, right? How to recognize the patient's own tumor. That's why you get these long-term pharmacodynamic effects. In pancreatic cancer, this is also an area of huge unmet need. We've shown very encouraging overall survival data based on an ongoing randomized clinical trial. There's no real competition there, right? Because nobody has been able to really substantially extend the life of these patients. Same is true for non-small cell lung cancer. I spoke briefly about that. These are patients who have failed all standard of care, including immune checkpoint inhibitors. They have a median overall survival of 12 to 14 months with optimal therapy at this moment. If we are able to demonstrate next quarter already that we see better overall survival than 14 months, then this is very encouraging. We know already that this is safe and well tolerated. We've dosed it now to around 1,000 patients. So we have a huge safety database. So I feel quite confident saying that. But I also believe that the data may actually look much better than 14 months, based on initial case reports that we've seen. And we see that also the uninjected lesions disappear. High-grade glioma, by definition, I spoke about that, and a huge unmet need, no competition. So we have actually chosen to go really after the most difficult to treat cancers. And that's, I think, why we will be really differentiated if we are successful. For each of the indications that I spoke about, we have initial proof of concept, not only in mice, but also in patients, in humans.
Yeah, amazing. Honestly, I love sitting and listening to this. Yeah, I mean, it's all been, so positive what we've been talking about. On the other hand, you recently underwent 50% layoffs, which, across the last year or so has been a pretty unfortunate trend. Can you just share some insights into the reasons behind the decision and how it aligns with your future with Candel?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's always very painful to let people go, especially because we deeply invest in talent, we develop our people, we deeply invest in creating high-performing teams with a very strong culture, with the right behaviors, where people are real team players and work together, driven by the best science and innovation, and have fun at the same time, right? So we build a very strong team. And then it's very difficult to make a decision to let people go. But it happens in every business, and definitely in biotech, but also on a large scale in pharma. So I've been in exactly the same position in pharma. There may be different needs in a company over time. And here our goal was to really extend our runway during a very difficult global economic time. Right, last year was still extremely difficult, 2023. I think now we're starting to see some improvement in the early days of 2024. But we thought the best way to extend our runway, to get to multiple value-creating inflection points this year in 2024, is by reducing the fixed cost, by reducing the headcount, and by trying to help these people to find other jobs where we can and be well networked. And of course, that's the beauty of an ecosystem like Boston and many other biotech and pharma companies. Hopefully, these people will all find another good job with our strong references. But it was truly a business decision to get to the value-creating inflection points and extend our runway, and that's what we did. And actually, I was just at JP Morgan and spoke to many people, including many investors and investment banks, and we got consistent positive feedback about this, that this was the right decision from a business perspective.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that explains it massively. There's no... Well, I don't know. Maybe there is, but I don't think there's any industry like biotech where you're up and down, and you have your needs of the company at certain times, and therefore the certain people's expertise and so on. So, yeah,
absolutely true.
Yeah, and then you mentioned it briefly there in terms of the struggles of last year. What do you think going into next year, 2024 and beyond?
Well, at some point, things will get better, right? We went through a few very difficult years. We did the IPO in 2021 in July, just before the whole thing went downhill. And it was already difficult. And we were unknown at the time. So we did a straight-to-market IPO without a strong financial basis before that time. But we thought it was the right thing to do because actually we did not go back to the market since then. We worked in a very cost-effective way. And we got to many inflection points. We've done everything that we promised to the markets, and we've consistently over-delivered. So we plan to continue to do that, actually. But it was already a difficult time. The last few years have been brutal, I think, in biotech. I do believe that at some point things will need to get better because there's still incredible unmet needs from a clinical, a patient, and societal perspective, but also enormous opportunity for very high returns over time if we get it right. And it should all be driven and be based on data in patients. If you can show that you can really stop tumors from growing and patients live longer, they have the right quality of life, that's what really matters. And these are multi-billion opportunities over time. So I think probably, I don't want to sound cynical, but in a way, there's also a positive side effect of the brutal times that we've seen, because there will also, I think it may help to select the patients who are focused on real medicines and on real science. During JP Morgan, just a few weeks ago, I got consistent feedback that everybody felt that things were improving. And in a way, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's also a collective psychological element to this. If everybody believes that things are going better in biotech, it will get better. But also other factors that we do not control, like inflation, will probably improve. And of course, we will need to see how that develops. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the whole field. I think we will continue to see that companies fall over, especially those that have no data that suggests that it could be transformative. We need to focus on things that will really move the needle, not another Me Too medicine, but really innovative science that also delivers real data, not just immunosophical approaches, as I call it, but things that are real. So I'm optimistic about Candel. We have 6 inflection points this year. So it's a very rich pipeline, including 5 based on clinical data, including a phase 3 trial that could be a registrational trial.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned CG oncology earlier. You know, if that's anything to go by, I mean, I think the IPO was 380 million or something like that. You know, it's pretty impressive. So yeah, I mean, if you look through like the eyes of, you know, when you were at Flagship and, you know, maybe the venture capitalist side, what would you be thinking now? And, you know, does your strategy change in any way?
I think our strategy would not have changed. We've been super focused on the real creation of data, and we've been cheap where we could be cheap, right? Like Breakthrough Cancer Foundation supports our high-grade glioma program with a grant of $16 million US dollar for the extension of a phase 1b clinical trial. And this goes to the PI, Nino Chiocca, who's the head of neurosurgery at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, very, very close collaborator and an outstanding scientist and neurosurgeon. So we don't pay a lot of money for that. We are our own CRO. So we do 5 clinical trials, but we don't work with the CRO. I don't say that it's wrong to work with the CRO. At GSK, I made different decisions, and I said, well, we should probably be 50% outsourcing because you want to have flexibility. But here it's different. We have continuously worked in clinical development. So we hired our own CRAs, clinical research associates. And for us, that's much cheaper, actually, much cheaper way than outsourcing it. In manufacturing, we did exactly the opposite. There were plans before I joined to build our own manufacturing facility. I thought that's going to be a huge fixed cost. Producing, manufacturing HSV and adenoviral gene constructs is relatively straightforward nowadays. There's overcapacity in the industry. It's better not to build the whole factory ourselves, but to be able to switch it on and off where it makes sense. So we've tried to be very conscious about our strategy. And again, we did relatively small IPO because we were unknown at the time. And we didn't have all the fantastic science that we have now with the paper in Nature and fast track designation just in 1 year twice for non-small cell lung cancer, in pancreatic cancer. And so it's now very different. So I think we have been very focused on getting value creation, getting the science right. And we even stopped programs that we believe in. I'll give you an example. We have the clinical trial in borderline resectable pancreatic cancer. We have beautiful data that we can show that after 3 years, in the patients who got our medicine, CAN-2409, survival was more than 70%, compared to 17%, 17, in the control group, which is compared to what you would expect based on historical controls. This is still an early trial, so it's early days. But when you look at the totality of the evidence across multiple solid tumors that we are testing, it's consistently positive. But we stopped recruitment because first I wanted to see these data. And also it takes a few years to get to the endpoint overall survival if you enroll new patients. We don't have this runway at this time. So we just paused, hopefully after securing funding at the right time in the right way. and we keep optionality there, we will restart this program because we truly believe in it. And the same is true for lung cancer. So that has been our strategy. We've kept it tight, which was the right thing to do during very difficult economic times. But hopefully we will be able to really expand into other programs, to restart programs that I just alluded to, because it's a big opportunity for patients and for investors.
Yeah, amazing. And when you look at like the year of last year and maybe recovery of this year, how do you deal with the pressures of such a volatile industry?
Well, it's not always easy, right? But then I will quote Churchill here, because I spent part of my life in England. So it's just by stay calm and carry on, right? Have a ruthless focus on data and quality. Bring the right people together, make sure they work together in the right way. And then, of course, in your personal life, you always need to balance it, right? So I try to stay fit, right, so that you can deal with the stress. And I try to find time to reconnect with my family and friends, which is important. So I take my wife and children always on a trip to a very nice place every year. Nice. They live in different countries, right? So we need to make sure that we all get together. So we just went to Costa Rica together for an amazing trip. And
lovely.
So that's how I try to deal with this, so that we can invest in being here in the long term and continuing to be resilient, actually.
Yeah. I mean, how do those pressures change with, like your time in big pharma compared to smaller biotech?
The pressures are different, but I would not say more or less. Let's say compared to my role at GSK, which was a very big role, where I also oversaw the therapy area units in oncology and infectious diseases and immunoinflammation. So there's a lot of work. It never stops, actually. There's no control over your life. So that gives an enormous pressure. And then you need to not only lead in the hierarchy, but also in the matrix and the governance process to get this massive oil tanker almost, right, move in the right direction and get everybody behind it. So that is it's amazing, and I loved working for a big company because there's so much impact you can have. But I didn't have much control over my calendar, I have to say. But compare that to biotech, that's where you can move much faster. So our governance process is highly simplified and streamlined, but we work still with the best people in the world. So I've created a research advisory board, RAB, with people like Jim Allison, the Nobel Prize laureate, and Pam Sharma, one of the major leaders in immuno-oncology, all the key leaders in the specific disease areas that we are interested in. So they participate in our internal governance process. That's a science and investment board, that we look at decision making through multiple lenses, including what's the data telling us, what is the best scientific decision, but also how can we create as much value, how can we work in the most cost-effective way, and then all of that is well prepared. But then the meeting in itself takes 1.5 hours. Then we make the decision, and then the next day we're going to do it. So that goes very fast, and that's very nice, actually. So I love that, but of course there's a very different pressure in biotech, because there's always every day and night the question, what is my runway? How can we use that in the most efficient way possible? You also need to do that in big pharma, because it's proper governance, but it's on a different level. So the stress and the pressure are slightly different.
Yeah, I can imagine. There was something that Steve Jobs said it, didn't he? Where he said Apple were the biggest startup on the planet. And his mindset was that, even though no matter how big they grow, they're not going to become corporate. They're always going to stay startup. And that was for quick decisions, but also making sure that the great people in the company stayed with the company and had the responsibility and decisions to make. That was his mentality.
Yeah, which is absolutely true, right? But in a big company, you could organize it in decentralized units, but then you need to be super disciplined and not giving into the tendency to, in the end, add another level of control, and then you end up in a mess. So, but in the end, smaller units where you can be agile and quick, and where everybody is personalized, where there's visibility of the leaders. So you can also have very strong performance management, but also reward people. All of that is a beauty of smaller biotech companies.
Yeah, 100%. And just to finish us off, I always like to ask this question. So if you could go back in time and give advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've always worked without a long-term career planning, I have to say, and I would still say I would still give myself that advice: follow your heart, follow your intuition, work with the best people, best as defined as super talented leaders in the field, but also people with the right behaviors and the right culture. You don't want to work for a psychopath, right? And they sometimes also appear at the top. I would give myself that advice again. I think always try to do your best as much as possible and do to the best you can to deliver. I've done that as a physician, and I was proud to get an award from the former Minister of Health in the Netherlands for being the best rheumatologist for my clinical skills,
Wow.
elected by my peers. So I was proud of that. Most people only knew me as a scientist, actually. I deeply care about my patients, and I practiced medicine for 25 years, and then I moved more and more into science, and we became like a machine. We published one paper on average per week, and I became a highly cited immunologist. But it was all driven by trying to do my best, trying to work with the best people, because there always people have better insights than you have. So you should always be modest, right? And then ask for peer review, leverage collective intelligence, have fun at the same time, right? Because you live your life only once, but also it helps to unleash creativity, I think, and build stronger teams, build trust. So I would not change any of that when I look back. I've always done exactly the same. I've tried to improve patients' lives, but from different angles and different perspectives. As a treating physician, later as somebody who has trained many internists and rheumatologists, later as a scientist, later as a business leader in a big pharma company, and then now later from a venture capital perspective and as a biotech leader. But for me, it's always the same. It's about quality. It's about getting the best science out, improving the lives of patients. Meanwhile, make sure that everybody benefits and that you really create value and based on the long-term vision.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, look, Paul Peach, it's been a pleasure to have you. I've really felt the passion coming across for science and everything like that. And if I wasn't feeling positive about the year coming up, then I really am now. So honestly, a pleasure to have you, and thanks for the time.
No, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure being here. Great questions. It was really nice to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul Peter.
Bye.